I'll never forget the feeling of being completely alone in the vast expanse of winter. It's as if the world has been drained of its color and vibrancy, leaving only a monochrome canvas of snow and ice. Our group of 5 had set out to explore the remote wilderness, seeking refuge from the chaos of modern life. We were drawn to the mystical energies that lingered in this forsaken place, hoping to tap into their power for our own purposes. We arrived at the research station in late December, just as the first snows were falling. The wooden structure stood like a skeletal giant amidst the frozen forest, its windows glowing like lanterns in the dark. Our leader, Sarah, had spent months preparing us for this expedition. She was a scholar of the occult, and her knowledge of ancient rituals and symbolism was unparalleled. As we settled into our routine, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The isolation was starting to get to me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Sarah had been researching an ancient ritual known as the Pentagram of Solomon. It was said to hold the power to summon and bind malevolent entities from the depths of hell. We were determined to perform the ritual, convinced that we could harness its energy for our own gain. But as the days passed, I started to wonder if we had made a terrible mistake. It was on the 5th day of our stay that we received a strange package in the mail. It arrived without return address or indication of who might have sent it. Inside, we found a small, intricately carved wooden box adorned with symbols from the pentagram. Sarah's eyes lit up as she examined the box, and I knew then that we were in for something much bigger than we had anticipated. As the sun set on our 5th day, we gathered around the fire to discuss our next move. The wind howled outside like a chorus of restless spirits, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded towards some unknown fate. I glanced at Sarah, but she just smiled and said, "Tonight, we begin." Little did I know, we were about to unleash a terror beyond our wildest imagination. The night air was heavy with anticipation as we set up our equipment for the ritual. The wooden box sat atop the altar, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Sarah's voice rose above the howling wind as she began to recite the incantations of the pentagram. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and a creeping sense of dread that seemed to seep into every pore. As the final words left her lips, the air around us seemed to thicken, taking on a life of its own. The wind died down, and an oppressive silence fell upon us. In that moment, I knew we had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. As the silence hung in the air like a physical presence, Sarah's eyes locked onto something across the clearing. Her gaze was fixed on the wooden box, and for an instant, I thought she had seen something that hadn't been there before. The wind began to pick up again, rustling the snow-covered trees as if it too were watching us with bated breath. Sarah's face was pale, her skin almost translucent in the flickering firelight. She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving the box. I felt a shiver run down my spine as she reached out a trembling hand and touched the lid. The moment her skin made contact with the wood, the air around us erupted into chaos. The wind howled like a pack of wolves, and the trees seemed to twist and writhe in agony. I stumbled backward, my heart racing with fear, as Sarah's eyes rolled back in her head. She began to speak in a voice that wasn't quite her own, the words slithering out of her mouth like snakes on a summer's day. The language was ancient, long forgotten, and yet, somehow, I knew exactly what she was saying. "The veil is thinning," she intoned, "and the shadows are coming." I tried to take a step forward, but my legs were frozen in place. The world around me had gone mad, and I was powerless to stop it. And then, like a cold hand closing around my heart, I felt it, a presence that didn't belong in this world. A presence that watched us with an unblinking gaze, waiting for its moment to strike. As Sarah's words hung in the air, the presence seemed to coalesce into a tangible form. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart, revealing a glimpse of the abyss that lay beyond. The wind died down and an oppressive silence fell over us once more. Sarah's eyes snapped back into focus, and she took a deep breath before beginning the incantation. Her voice was low and husky, the words dripping with an otherworldly power. "Astra descendo," she intoned, her hand weaving intricate patterns in the air. The symbols seemed to shimmer and pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they were alive and hungry for attention. I felt my skin crawl as I watched, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before me. The presence stirred, its power growing with each passing moment. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before, a living, breathing entity that seemed to be drawing the very life force out of us. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine, and for an instant I saw something there that gave me pause. A flicker of doubt, perhaps, or a glimmer of uncertainty. But it was quickly extinguished, replaced by an unyielding determination that sent shivers down my spine. "Malum descendit," she continued, her voice growing louder, more insistent. The words seemed to shake the very foundations of our reality, like a stone cast into a still pond. And then, in an instant that will haunt me forever, Sarah spoke the final word, "Dominus." The air around us erupted once more, but this time it was different. This time, it was as if we had unleashed something that could never be contained. As the final word left Sarah's lips, the air around us seemed to coalesce into a palpable presence. It was as if we had awakened something that had lain dormant for centuries, and now it was stirring, its power coursing through the very fabric of reality. The trees seemed to twist and writhe in agony, their branches grasping towards us like skeletal fingers. The wind began to pick up once more, but this time it was different. This time it carried a malevolent intent, as if the storm itself had developed a consciousness that was determined to destroy us. I stumbled backward, my heart racing with fear, as Sarah's eyes snapped back into focus. She took a step forward, her gaze fixed on some point beyond our clearing, and I knew in that instant that we were lost. The ritual had gone too far, and now there was no turning back. The presence continued to grow in power, its influence seeping into every pore of my being like a cold, dark water. I felt my mind begin to unravel, threads of sanity snapping like brittle twine as the storm raged on around us. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it. A low, thrumming sound that seemed to vibrate through every cell in my body. It was a drumbeat, pulsing with an otherworldly energy, and I knew in that instant that we were being summoned to some dark and ancient place, where the very fabric of reality would be torn asunder. As I watched in horror, the air around us began to distort and ripple, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. The drumbeat grew louder, more insistent, and I felt my very soul being pulled towards it. Sarah's eyes were fixed on some point beyond our clearing, her face twisted into a mask of ecstasy or madness. I couldn't quite tell which. Her hands were raised to the sky, and as she did so, the air around us seemed to coalesce into a swirling vortex of colors and lights. The trees seemed to writhe in agony, their branches grasping towards the sky like claws. And then, in an instant that will haunt me forever, a figure began to take shape within the heart of the vortex. It was tall and imposing, its presence radiating an aura of power and malevolence that made my blood run cold. Its face was twisted into a grotesque parody of human features: eyes, nose, mouth, all distorted and elongated, like those of some ancient, forgotten deity. As it took shape, the drumbeat reached a fever pitch, and I felt my very sanity begin to unravel. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. All I could do was watch, transfixed by the horror that was unfolding before me. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine, and for an instant I saw something there that gave me pause. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or a glimmer of warning, I couldn't quite tell which. But it was quickly extinguished, replaced by an unyielding determination that sent shivers down my spine. The figure took another step forward, its presence filling the clearing with an unspeakable horror. And then, in a voice that was both ancient and eternal, it spoke. "I am Azazel," it intoned, its words dripping with malevolent intent. "And you are mine." As Azazel's eyes locked onto Sarah's, I felt a shiver run down my spine. She seemed to be frozen in place, her gaze fixed on the ancient being with an unnerving intensity. And then, without warning, she spoke. "Welcome," she intoned, her voice dripping with an otherworldly power. Azazel's eyes narrowed, its face twisting into a snarl of delight. "I have been waiting for you," it hissed, its voice like a rusty gate scraping against concrete. Sarah's body began to convulse, her muscles tensing and relaxing in a slow, rhythmic motion. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and I could see the whites of her eyeballs bulging from their sockets like two pale marbles. Azazel took a step closer, its presence filling the clearing with an unspeakable horror. "Take hold," it intoned, its voice echoing through my mind like a mantra. Sarah's body arched backward, her head thrashing against the ground with a sickening crunch. I stumbled backward, my heart racing with fear, as Azazel reached out and grasped her shoulders. Its cold, bony fingers dug deep into her skin, and I could feel its power coursing through her veins like liquid fire. "Mine," it intoned, its voice dripping with possessive fervor. And then, in an instant that will haunt me forever, Sarah's body went limp. She slumped to the ground, her eyes frozen in a permanent stare of terror. Azazel released its grip on her shoulders, and I saw its face twist into a twisted grin of triumph. "She is mine," it intoned, its voice echoing through my mind like a triumphant chant. As the days passed, Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would lash out at me without warning, her eyes blazing with a fury that I had never seen before. At first I thought it was just the aftermath of the ritual, but as the weeks turned into months, I realized that something was seriously wrong. She would talk to herself for hours on end, her voice rising and falling in a maddening cadence. She would see things that weren't there, her eyes scanning the room with a wild, paranoid intensity. And then, one day, she disappeared. Vanished into thin air, leaving me alone and frightened in our empty, echoing home. I searched for her everywhere, but she was gone. I found her later, curled up in a ball on the floor of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. She was muttering to herself, her eyes rolling wildly as she thrashed about like a possessed woman. "They're coming," she would say, over and over again, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "They'll never let me go." I tried to reach out to her, to bring her back from the brink of madness, but it was too late. She had already descended into the depths of insanity, lost forever in a world of hallucinations and delusions. And as I stood there, frozen in horror, I realized that Azazel was still with us, watching and waiting for its next victim. The ritual had unleashed something ancient and evil upon the world, and now it was coming for me. I stumbled through the darkened corridors, my footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. Every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was being herded towards some unknown fate. The air was thick with an eerie silence, punctuated only by the soft whispering of unseen voices. It was a sound that sent shivers down my spine, a maddening susurration that seemed to seep into my very bones. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. The whispers were real and they were coming for me. Every step creaked and groaned beneath my feet, as if the walls themselves were protesting my presence. I felt like an intruder, a trespasser in a place that was not mine. And then I heard it, a soft, raspy voice speaking words that sent a chill down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered. "Now you'll never leave." I spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. The whisper seemed to be coming from all around me, echoing off the walls and ceiling. It was a sound that was both familiar and yet completely alien, like a forgotten childhood memory that had been buried deep beneath the surface of my mind. And then I felt it, a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder pulling me back into the darkness. I tried to shake it off, but it only tightened its grip. "You're mine now," it whispered, its breath hot against my ear. "Forever and ever." The world went black, and I was consumed by an endless, darkest night. As I emerged from the darkness, I found myself in a vast, cavernous space filled with ancient tomes and forbidden knowledge. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dust. I stumbled through the rows of shelves, my eyes scanning the titles for any sign of what I was looking for. And then I saw it. A book bound in black leather, adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. It was an ancient tome, one that spoke of dark magic and forbidden knowledge. I knew that I should not have come here, but I felt drawn to the book, as if it held some secret that only I could unlock. As I opened the cover, a musty smell wafted out, carrying with it whispers of the damned. The pages were filled with arcane symbols and diagrams, each one more disturbing than the last. And then I saw it, a passage written in blood, penned by some long-dead sorcerer who had dared to dabble in forces beyond his control. It spoke of Azazel, of its power and its malevolence. And as I read the words, I knew that I was staring into the face of madness. The knowledge was too much for me, and I stumbled backwards, collapsing to the floor in a heap. When I looked up, I saw it. Azazel standing before me, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly energy. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its voice like a rusty gate. "Now you will never leave." As I gazed into Azazel's eyes, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew that I had to escape, but my legs seemed rooted to the spot. Azazel began to move towards me, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. It raised its hand, and I saw that it was holding a small, leather-bound book. The cover was adorned with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. "The Twisted Rites of the Ancients," it read, in letters that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. Azazel opened the book, revealing pages filled with arcane diagrams and rituals. Each one depicted a twisted, nightmarish scenario, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. And then I saw it, a ritual that spoke of summoning an ancient power, one that would grant unimaginable power to whoever completed it. But at what cost? The ritual seemed to require human sacrifice, and I knew that I was the only one left to save. Azazel's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a cold, calculating gaze pierce my very soul. "You will be the first to die," it hissed, its voice like a snake slithering through the grass. "And then you will become the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe." The air seemed to grow colder, as if the very darkness itself was coalescing into a tangible form. I knew that I had to act fast or risk being consumed by the void. With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself at Azazel, determined to stop whatever twisted ritual it had in mind. I launched myself at Azazel, determined to stop whatever twisted ritual it had in mind. As I tackled the creature, it let out a deafening roar, its wings unfolding from its back like massive bat wings. The air was filled with the stench of decay and corruption as Azazel's form began to shift and contort, its body stretching and twisting like a living shadow. I rolled to the side, avoiding the creature's snapping claws by mere inches. As I scrambled to my feet, I saw that Azazel had transformed into a massive, hulking monstrosity, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly energy. The air was electric with tension as we faced off against each other, our powers locked in a struggle for dominance. With a fierce cry, I launched myself at Azazel, determined to end this twisted game once and for all. Our bodies clashed, our fists flying as we exchanged blows. But despite my best efforts, I couldn't seem to land a hit on the creature. It was too fast, too strong, and seemed to absorb every blow like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Just when I thought I was going to be overwhelmed, I remembered the words of an ancient text I had read earlier. The words spoke of a powerful artifact hidden deep within the ritual site, one that could banish Azazel back to whatever dark realm it came from. With newfound determination, I reached out and grasped the artifact, feeling its power course through me like liquid fire. As I held the artifact aloft, I saw Azazel's form begin to falter, its powers waning as it realized it was being banished. With a final, defeated roar, the creature vanished into nothingness, leaving me standing victorious but scarred and shaken by the experience. The ritual site was silent once more, its dark energies dissipating like mist in the morning sun. As I stood victorious amidst the ruins of the ritual site, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was still off. The air seemed heavy with an unspoken malevolence, as if Azazel's defeat had only awakened a deeper, more sinister force. I looked around at the twisted, nightmarish landscape, the symbols etched into the walls seeming to mock me like some macabre jest. And then I saw her. Sarah, my friend, my confidant, stood before me, her eyes vacant and unseeing. She was catatonic, as if trapped in a perpetual state of shock. "Sarah," I whispered, shaking her gently. "Sarah, can you hear me?" But she didn't respond. Panic set in as I realized that the ritual had taken more from us than just our own souls. It had taken Sarah's mind, leaving her a shell of her former self. Desperate to save her, I rushed her to the hospital, praying that somehow, someway, she would be restored to herself. But as I watched her lie motionless in the hospital bed, I knew that it was too late. The ritual had left its mark, and Sarah was gone forever. I slumped against the wall, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The world seemed to spin around me, colors bleeding together into a sickly, pulsing haze. And then there were the dreams. Dark, twisted visions that haunted my every waking moment, conjuring up images of Azazel's face, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. I knew that I had to confront them head-on, but even now, as I sat here in this cold, dark world, I wasn't sure if I could face what was coming next.